the show on the road. So Joe Biden actually decided to sit down and do a full interview. He did an interview with CNN. Now, to be fair, right, like I'm sure that he didn't have to answer questions that weren't like pre-approved or something, because generally, press with Joe Biden is relatively controlled. I think Sage Steele talked at length about this with her experience in doing an interview with Joe Biden for ESPN. So I do want to go through this interview and see what this interview is like, because I honestly have not seen an interview, like a full-length interview with Joe Biden in quite a while. And then afterwards, I'm going to go through this New York Post article, which kind of fact-checked the claims made by Joe Biden during this interview. Apparently, they said he averaged a lie a minute, more or less. So kind of interested in seeing what exactly he got wrong. But I'm also interested in watching this interview as well. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Mr. President, thank you so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
So Trump attended a groundbreaking here where we are for Foxconn. He promised 13,000 jobs, and only about 1,000 of those actually exist right now. So I know you're promising more than 2,000 union construction.
What's the timetable? I don't know. So I heard him bragging because I follow his propaganda Instagram account. I think it's called Biden Harris HQ, whatever. And he was talking about how he brought jobs to this plant that Trump promised, but was never able to actually provide. I don't know what the timetable on that was. Like, it's very possible that, actually, hold on, let me see. Foxconn.
Jobs of those actually exist right now. So I know you're promising more than 2,000 union here where we are.
Let me see here. Trump Foxconn promise, because it is very possible that he lied. Hold on, let's see here. Foxconn plant, once touted by Trump as a 13,000 job juggernaut, will now create just 1,500 jobs. Taiwan electronics manufacturer Foxconn is drastically scaling back a planned $10 billion factory in Wisconsin, confirming its retreat from a project that former President Donald Trump once called the eighth wonder of the world. Okay, I don't see anything that Foxconn makes as being the eighth wonder of the world. That's kind of funny. Oh, well, it was started in 2017. I don't know how timetables work of factories. So I don't know how long it would have taken to create this. But I mean, estimates do change. I don't know if it's entirely Trump's fault, but at the same time, Trump shouldn't have made a promise on the behalf of what someone else would do if that wasn't set in stone. I don't know how much of that is under his control, but still, it's pretty bad practice, because then you get caught up in situations like this.
For Foxconn, he promised 13,000 jobs, and only about 1,000 of those actually exist right now. So I know you're promising more than 2,000 union construction jobs, and that 100,000 people are going to get trained in AI here. Why should people here believe that you will succeed at creating jobs where Trump failed?
He's never succeeded in creating a job, and I've never failed.
Huh?
I've created over 15 million jobs since I've been president. 15 million.
What? But, I mean, I think both people have gained new jobs under both Trump and Biden's economy, but people have also lost jobs under Joe Biden's economy. Like, I think didn't Donald Trump set records for unemployment rates during his presidency? I'm not sure that Joe Biden has done the same.
3.75 years. And secondly, Microsoft is a serious player, and they're very much engaged in making sure that they pick this area as sort of the home base for the AI in the nation. And they're gonna do it. And and by the way,
well, I mean, to be fair, Foxconn said they were going to offer like 13,000 jobs, and they didn't do that. So estimates could be off, right?
Well, I shouldn't go into it, but Trump he started off with a golden shovel,
For the groundbreaking.
and talked about this being, the eighth wonder of the world. When has he ever done anything he said? I'm not being facetious. Think about it.
What do you mean?
He started off, he lost, other than Herbert Hoover.
I mean, Donald Trump has done a lot of things that he said he would do. He improved the economy drastically. I'm pretty sure he cut taxes. It's not like Trump just lies about things he's going to do when he becomes president. In fact, one thing people liked about him is that he was one of the few politicians who actually ran on a particular thing. And I think except for the whole during the swamp thing, he more or less did follow through with a lot of his promises.
He's the only other president who lost more jobs than created in his 4-year term. He's, in the way he managed the end of his last year when we were dealing with COVID, 1 million people died. He told people inject bleach that may do it. Wasn't a real problem.
That's not true. That's not true. He was spitballing. To be fair, he was saying stuff he didn't know he was talking about. He should have kept his mouth shut. But he never told people to inject themselves with bleach. He looked at the lady next to him and was like, "Hey, what if we could inject people with bleach? Could that get rid of the disease and stuff?" And I think she shook her head no. I mean, it was a cringy moment, but I don't understand why people feel like they have to lie about Trump in order to make their point. Maybe they feel like the reality of what Trump did as president wasn't actually that bad, so therefore they have to make stuff up.
But 1 million people died. He told people inject bleach that may do it. Wasn't a real problem. When he did an interview with one of your colleagues where he just flat out acknowledged he knew how dangerous it was, but he didn't want to speak to it. It's and look at what he says he's going to do if he gets elected. He says he's going to do away with what I've done on Medicare, reducing the price of Medicare drastically. He said he's going to do away with the Affordable Care Act. He said he's going to do it just down the line. So we have a very different view. I look at it from a physician, not being facetious, from the Scranton perspective. He looks at it from Mar-a-Lago perspective. He wants to give more significant tax cuts to the super wealthy.
No, that's not true. Super wealthy and middle class, which is what he did last time. And we did actually see some of those tax cuts trickle down, right? They were I think it was during COVID, he cut taxes or gave a stimulus check or whatever to big corporations. And what did they do? They went and passed that along, right? We had Facebook giving tons of bonuses out in California. So if you provide a stable economy and you cut taxes, then you are going to see some companies actually passing down those benefits to their workers. Because companies are going to hoard money. People say, oh, this is all about greed with companies making record income when you adjust for inflation. It's not greed. It's that everyone who has been paying attention to the economy is rightly speculating and expecting for there to be an economic depression somewhere within the next 3 years. And to be fair, I think a lot of that can be blamed on Donald Trump, unfortunately, because he did have some very poor monetary management policies when it came to how the Fed managed the United States dollar. But when the economy is stable and people when the economy is not doing well, companies, of course, are going to try to hoard money because when the economy crashes, they need to have a bank of cash in order to operate it from for a longer period of time. And this is actually why, if you look at stuff like COVID and things, smaller companies, mom and pop shops and stuff, don't last as long as big companies because they don't have those massive cash reserves that bigger companies are able to accumulate over time. I love using this analogy. Nobody calls a squirrel greedy or evil for storing up extra acorns ahead of the winter. And yet when companies do it, they're somehow viewed as the bad guys by these progressive socialists and communists. I don't understand why. It's pretty dumb. I think a large part of it is people just hate rich people because they're envious and they wish that they could have more money. So that's part of it too. I think it's unfair that somebody else has so much more money than they do.
Billionaires in America. You know what their average federal tax is? 8.3%. It talks about if I want to raise it to 25%, that would raise $40 billion, $400 billion over 10 years.
And how many jobs would that sacrifice, right? How many jobs would that cost? How many of those companies would just fire a bunch of workers and lower wages in response to that?
You can further reduce the deficit, which I've been able to reduce. I mean, it's just a completely different perspective on how we should proceed.
When it comes, though, to the 100,000 jobs specifically that we're talking about here, people training in AI, the actual jobs, when are they actually going to have jobs, those 100,000 people that are being trained?
That's a good question.
Probably the first tranche in 3 to 4 years. The community colleges are going to, the one we're at, we're going to provide for 2,000 folks and to be able to be trained, 200 a year. And it's going to go, the whole pipeline goes all the way through out to high schools and training facilities. You know, it used to be that when I was in high school, and even at the tail end, very tail end before you went to high school, most public high schools had shop and home, you know, learn to work with your hands. It doesn't exist anymore. And so it allows people who have skills and be able to train to technical skills to be able to make a decent living without a college degree.
Interesting. So he's talking about like trade school stuff here, which is good. It's cool that we're pouring into that as well.
Need.
So when we talk about the bet on AI and sort of what it means, I don't know if you saw this weekend, Warren Buffett had his annual meeting and he talked about AI. So the first thing he said was, okay, it's got enormous potential for good. But then he likened it to the development of nuclear weapons in the US. And he said it scares the hell out of him. You know, he always says it like he sees it. And then he says, quote, he doesn't understand a damn thing about it. And that may capture how many Americans feel. Does AI scare you?
AI has enormous potential, enormous downside potential. That's why 3 years ago I got together the major architects of AI from the different operations around the world. I met with them in Europe and here in the United States. And it ranges all the way from one of the leaders saying it's going to take over human thinking, all the way to folks who say, no, it's not a problem. And so that's why I set out certain standards that it can do no harm, and we have to make sure we know how to do that.
Okay, and I wonder, you know, what that standard of harm is going to be. Does harm mean hurt your feelings, right? Does AI have to be woke, or is it just saying AI can't like kill people? And what if the AI is dumb and doesn't know better and does an accident anyways, right? Like, I think that a lot of the claims that I've seen of like Teslas running people over or causing casualties and accidents, I think a lot of them are dubious because usually it involves like people being asleep at the wheel, and when you're asleep, like, you know, you like move over and stuff. So it's very possible these people weren't paying attention, jostled the wheel, and it caused the autopilot to deactivate and stuff. So I don't trust a lot of the fear mongering when it comes to Tesla's autopilot, that it's wildly dangerous and it'll just like kill you while you're in the driver's seat. But it is possible that Tesla, something like a Tesla, could kill you. And, you know, that would meet a standard of harm for sure. But what if like you've done tons and tons and tons of testing, and the first time out of like a trillion uses, it finally gets you killed? There has to be some sort of margin of error. Humans can cause harm to other humans. Like, humans aren't being banned for that. I mean, if you do harm someone considerably, you might end up going to jail. But like, that might be a silly analogy. But all of that to say, you do need to have some margin of error because no AI system is going to be perfect. Just like how no human person is going to be perfect. So people will be driving on the road causing harm to each other, and AI cars will probably be doing that at a lesser rate than humans, and probably still get flack for that, which is insane.
Certain standards that can do no harm, and we have to make sure we know how to do that. We have to make sure it's controlled, and it's the most significant, I think, technological development in human history.
The most significant in human history.
Wait,
not in
wait.
terms
Can I wish that he gave more specifics on what those standards for do no harm are going to be. I was hoping that he would go into that because he was like, and how, but then he like changed the tenor of the conversation. He seems a bit scatterbrained in this interview, unfortunately. Somebody get this guy on my pillow because he looks like he's about to fall asleep.
war and peace, but in terms of being able to, one leader in the AI community said to me, it's going to overtake human thinking, and which is frightening.
Terrifying.
But the other, most think it can be used for everything from find cures for cancer to significantly increase productivity.
Man, do not bring up cancer. Do not bring up cancer because you are running out of time to cure this disease. We're like 5 or so months out from the election. You have not done anything, I don't think, to cure cancer. Cancer is not gone. Cancer is still around. I don't think we've had even any types of cancer get eradicated under your presidency. That's a major, major promise that you made that you have not delivered at all on.
So when you talk about the economy, of course, it is by far the most important issue for voters. It's also true right now, Mr. President, that voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls. And part of the reason for that may be the numbers. And you're aware of many of these, of course. The cost of buying a home in the United States is double what it was when you look at your monthly costs from before the pandemic.
Ooh.
Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Economic growth last week, far short of expectations. Consumer confidence, maybe no surprise, is near a 2-year low. With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're running out of time to turn that around?
Yo, that is a very hard-hitting question that CNN is asking Joe Biden, honestly. It's not... Now, let's be clear. In the grand scheme of things when it comes to general journalism, that's just a normal question. That's not a hard-hitting, heavy question. But it just feels like a massive blow because of how much the mainstream media in general has treated Joe Biden favorably when it comes to scrutinizing his presidency. Now, to be fair, I will say over the past year or two, the mainstream media has been criticizing him more. I think last year CNN ran a segment where they called him a serial liar, basically. So in recent years, Joe Biden actually has been getting properly criticized by the mainstream media, but still, it's surprising to see this type of question being asked of Joe Biden, appropriately or not.
We've already turned it around. Look at the Michigan survey.
What?
Turn that around.
We've already turned it around. Look at the Michigan survey. 65% of American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along. You know, how many, you guys do a poll at CNN, how many folks you have to call to get one response? The idea that we're in a situation...
I mean, polls may be inaccurate, but I don't think it's sample size.
Where things are so bad. The folks, I mean, we've created more jobs. We're in a situation where people have access to good paying jobs. And the last I saw, the combination of the inflation, the cost of inflation, all those things, that's really worrisome to people with good reason. That's why I'm working very hard to bring the cost of rentals down, to increase the number of homes that are available. But let me say it this way. When I started this administration, people were saying there's going to be a collapse in the economy. We have the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again, in the world.
Although GDP last week was far short of expectations.
Oh, it wasn't. Look, GDP is still...
It was.
Look at the response of the market.
No. I remember hearing the support on the radio. It was. Now, some people were kind of like coping and being like, oh, well, at least this means that the Fed won't change interest rates. But still, people were disappointed. And I think the markets had a relatively muted response. Usually if like a jobs report or a GDP report is positive, then the markets will skyrocket back up. The markets were creeping up as they usually do, but it wasn't like anything dramatic, like more than like 3 or 4%, I don't think.
Overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. And one of the reasons why people feel good about it not being as strong as it was before is they believe that the Fed's going to respond.
They hope they're going to get a rate cut.
Yeah. Well, so, but I mean,
No, wait. I thought the Fed was like, no, we're not going to do a rate cut. I thought they were like, no rate cuts expected because of the report. From the Fed. Interesting. So I'm actually seeing a lot of articles here generally saying that the Federal Reserve is not expecting to do rate cuts particularly soon. And CNN here was speculating that they actually might raise rates instead of cutting them, which is an interesting take. I think it was the first time I've seen anyone speculate that. But yeah, I don't think that rate cuts are happening within the next like 3-4 months at least. I think we'd have to get another financial quarter in before we could expect any word on that.
one of the reasons why people feel good about it not being as strong as it was before is they believe that the Fed's going to respond.
They hope they're going to get a rate cut.
Yeah. Well, so, but I mean, no president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office.
Okay, to be fair, a lot of the inflation was just because of how Trump responded to COVID-19. That's a big part of it. Another thing too is when Joe Biden came into office, it was COVID-19 time. We're not in COVID-19 anymore, in case you guys haven't noticed. So with companies being allowed to operate fully, because COVID-19 is basically, well, it's not like gone, but people have now accepted that it's basically a pretty bad flu. With people kind of catching up to that when it comes to like the science of it all, and companies being allowed to operate again, of course, naturally, the economy is going to come roaring back. So it shouldn't be surprising to anyone that the economy grows when the economy grows once companies are allowed to start working at full force.
9%. But look, people have a right to be concerned. Ordinary people, the idea that you bounce a check and you get a $30 fee for bouncing the check might change that. You can't charge more than $8 for that. Or your credit card, your late payment, $35. I mean, there's corporate greed going on out there, and it's got to be dealt with.
What percentage of like big corporations are making tons of money off of like check bounce backs and like these like $35 fees? This feels like a PR move. I don't know how many people are wanting to complain about, oh, I wish that I didn't have to pay $30 on a check bounce back. Like, I don't hear that very often when I'm talking to my friends or when I'm talking to my parents. Like, they don't really complain about that type of thing.
What about, but there's real pain. Grocery prices are up 30%, more than 30%.
Oh, no. But the check bounce back fees, we're going to get those down to $8. That'll solve all of this. You can use that $8 to buy all your groceries. Well, not $8. You could use all those like $12 or whatever to buy your groceries.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, and people are spending more on food and groceries than they have at any time really in the past 30 years.
What was that face that he was making too? He looked like either like angry or confused or upset. Like what?
People are spending more on food and groceries than they have at any time really in the past 30 years. That's a real day-to-day pain that people feel.
It really is.
It is insane that people are spending more for groceries now than they were during COVID-19. Considering how much the supply chain was choked, that's actually insane.
And it's real. But the fact is that if you take a look at what the people have, they have the money to spend. It angers them and angers me that you have to spend more. For example, the whole idea of this.
No. Because I don't think wages in general are rising at the same rate as inflation. So yes, people might have more money to spend, but they don't have the amount of money to spend on the amount of things that they would have ordinarily bought before prices kept on rising like this. So, I mean, people are buying fewer groceries because of how much costs are rising. More people are taking stuff up to the checkout aisle and having to put stuff back than before because of the inflation situation in America today. So it's not a thing where like people are angered to be like, oh man, I have to spend more money on these Cheerios. I have the extra money for the Cheerios because my job paid me more money, the exact same amount of money that I now have to spend extra in Cheerios. But I'm still mad that I have to spend more money. Let's be honest. If the people had the money to spend on the products, they would not be complaining. I literally heard someone say it because I peruse Reddit occasionally. Someone was talking about inflation hitting the cost of concessions at a theater, at an AMC. The person said, last time I went to an AMC that I bought concessions, I got like popcorn and a drink, and it was $17, which already is a lot of money. I went and bought popcorn in a drink today, and it was $24. The people who are complaining about that probably don't have that same level of rate increase on their wages, and that's why they're complaining. No one would be mad if they had the extra money to spend.
The notion that Senator Casey talked about, shrinkflation. I think it's on your
Same
program.
price for a smaller bottle of juice
well,
or something.
For example, Snickers bar, they did a thing, and it's like 20% less for the same price. That's corporate greed.
That's not corporate greed. That's not corporate greed. Is the squirrel gathering extra nuts for the winter corporate greed? Is that squirrel greed? No, it's not squirrel greed. It's just being wise. And that's what a lot of these companies are doing because they recognize that it's very likely sometime within the next 2 to 3 years or so, there's some sort of economic downturn, and they are storing up extra money in order to save for that catastrophic event. It's not corporate greed. It's just wise financial strategy.
Yeah. It's corporate greed. And we've got to deal with it. And that's what I'm working on.
I want to ask you about something happening as we sit here and speak, and that, of course, is Israel is striking Rafah. I know that you have paused, Mr. President, shipments of 2,000-pound U.S. bombs to Israel due to concern that they could be used in any offensive on Rafah. Have those bombs, those powerful 2,000-pound bombs, been used to kill civilians in Gaza?
Civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers.
Yeah, I mean, unequivocally, yes, but Hamas is using those civilians as human shields and Israel is attacking Hamas. You cannot kill Hamas terrorists without killing civilians as well. So, and also, by the way, according to international law, the death of civilians that are used as human shields is the fault of the person using them as human shields. It's not the fault of the people who are trying to kill the terrorists. So that's just kind of like a dumb question. Like, oh, do you think that the IDF has bombed civilians during the Israel-Hamas war? Like, yes, literally everybody knows that they're holding like toddlers and civilians like in front of their faces, basically strategically, maybe not literally. They're not going like, oh, it's Vietnam. Like they're not doing like that, but they're like holding civilians in front of them, hiding beneath them, so that whenever they're attacked, civilians get killed. Because Hamas doesn't necessarily care about the lives of the Palestinians. They care about trying to defeat or bring about the destruction of Israel and the killing of as many Jews as possible. And one thing that they can do to do that is get people mad at Israel. And what's one way that you can get people mad at Israel is if you force them to kill a lot of civilians, that men, women, and children, in order to kill the terrorists, because you're refusing to stop using the civilians as human shields. Easy dub. Because that way, even if every single Hamas terrorist gets killed, by that point there'll be so many dead Palestinians that other nations will start turning on Israel, and hopefully they'll destroy them. And that's Hamas's hope. Hamas does not care if they live or die. They don't care if the Palestinians live or die. All they really care about is whether or not Israel and the Jews die. And that's their end goal. And if that means that they have to die in order for that to happen, if that means that every single Palestinian has to die in order for that to happen, they will absolutely march towards that end, no matter the cost.
Bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. And I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah.
Now, I'm really curious as to like why this is the red line for the American administration. I personally think that Joe Biden really is just pandering to those like pro-Hamas protesters who were protesting on American campuses, because there has been, I think some fear mongering that a lot of Democrats are not going to vote for Joe Biden if he continues to support Israel as wholeheartedly as he has so far. I frankly think that's fear mongering. I don't think that's accurate because, at the end of the day, there's no one else for the Democrats to support. And the types of people who hate Israel and hate Jews that much aren't also going to be okay with Donald Trump winning, because honestly, he's probably going to support Israel stronger than Joe Biden would. So I think it's an unfair assessment, but it is the type of thing that people will look at the media and be like, hey, you know what? I got to do this so that I can get the Jew haters on my side. So that was my assumption, that he's just doing this in order to court that cohort and keep them from voting for like RFK Jr. or Trump, or keep them from just staying at home. But if somebody else has a good example or reason why, using the bombs to kill terrorists in Gaza, in all of these other places inside of Gaza has been completely fine, but Rafah is like the big no-no. If someone can explain to me the logic behind that, I would love to hear it.
To deal with the cities, to deal with that problem, we're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond to attacks like came out of the Middle East recently. But it's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah, artillery shells.
So, just to understand what they're doing right now in Rafah, is that not going into Rafah as you defined it?
No, they haven't gone into the population centers. What they did is right on the border, and it's causing problems with right now in terms of with Egypt, which I've worked very hard to make sure we have a relationship and help. But I've made it clear to Bibi and the War Cabinet, they're not going to get our support if, in fact, they go in these population centers. We're not walking away from Israel's security. We're walking away from Israel's ability to wage war in those areas.
So it's not over your red line yet?
Not yet, but we've held up the weapons. We've held up the one shipment. As an old shipment design, we held that up.
And I want to ask you one more thing, if I may. The images that people see out of Gaza are horrific. The UN's talking about some of these mass graves and the summary executions that there's been evidence of, torture. The images of children, it breaks anyone's heart to look at it. And obviously we've seen that frustration here in the U.S. on college campuses. And Mr. President, had signs at college campuses. Some say Genocide Joe. Any of us that have gone to those campuses, sometimes we hear that chant. Do you hear the message of those young Americans?
Absolutely, I hear the message. Look, two things. First of all, there's a legitimate right to free speech and protest. There's a legitimate right to do that, and they have a right to do that. There's not a legitimate right to use hate speech. There's not a legitimate right to threaten Jewish students. There's not a legitimate right to block people access to class. That's against.
That's such a big. Okay, that's an easy dub from Joe Biden here. I want to run that back because it's usually you don't hear like such common sense takes from Joe Biden. Let's run that back.
Look, two things. First of all, there's a legitimate right to free speech and protest. There's a legitimate right to do that, and they have a right to do that.
Right.
There's not a legitimate right to use hate speech.
Not true. There is a legitimate right to hate speech.
A legitimate right to threaten Jewish students. There's not a legitimate right to block people access to class.
And that's true. Like, and this I feel like was missing And this is the quiet truth that no one wanted to say in regards to all of the pro-Hamas protests, but I felt like it was pretty obvious, which is you can't just say that. Oh, excuse me. Oh my goodness, excuse me. I mean, that's what I get for drinking such carbonated drinks. But you can't just say that Zionists don't deserve to live. You can't just keep Jews from going to class, and you can't be, forcibly removing people from like your circle, keeping people from going to certain areas of the line, and then tossing them away when they violate your rules. Even though you're violating the university rules, you can't just do that. At that point, that's not a protest. That is, that is terrorism. That's a terrorist occupation. Which I made a whole video about that as well. So, I'm glad that he's speaking out against this. I think it's funny though that it took the mainstream media a month to catch up to that, and finally, a week ago, I was listening to CNN and they were like, aren't these kind of like the January 6th protests where they were also storming buildings and taking over buildings and refusing to leave and stuff? And yeah, it's kind of similar to that, except you don't have people who are let in to these areas by police. You don't. So it's actually worse than January 6th in that when it comes to the ethics of what's actually being done on the ground. Not in terms of magnitude, because at the end of the day, these are just some colleges. It's not an actual government building, but still.
Against the law. That's against the law. And if you look at the data, these demonstrations are real, but they're not nearly. I mean, look, and everybody's.
I know he lost his train of thought because he has dementia, but he has a really good point here as well, where the pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic cohort of the Democratic Party is a very, very small portion of the Democratic Party. I like using Congress as an example of this. Barely anyone in Congress is a member of the BDS movement. Barely anyone. So few people, in fact, that when the squad came onto the scene and they were supporting the BDS movement, people were like, huh? And people started calling them terrorists, and people were shocked because it is extremely rare to find anyone in public. Well, maybe not as much now because got all these Twitter people or whatever. But in general, it's difficult to find a significant amount of people who are willing to support the BDS movement just because it's just such an extreme radical position to take.
I made a speech on the Holocaust the other day, and I pointed out that it took 7 decades to get to the place where after the Holocaust occurred, and there's still anti-Semitism. Look what's happened in 7 weeks, 70. I mean, what's happening? Everybody's sort of forgotten about what happened in Israel. Those 1,200
I don't know how long they've been
kids murdered. I saw pictures. I went over there shortly after. A mother and a daughter being roped together and then kerosene poured and burned to death. Nothing's like that happened in the Jewish community since the Holocaust. So when I went over immediately after that happened, I said to Bibi, don't make the same mistake we made in America. We wanted to get bin Laden, and we'll help you get Sinwar. But we went into Afghanistan it made sense to go get bin Laden. It made no sense to try to unify Afghanistan. It made no sense, in my view, to engage in thinking that in Iraq they had a nuclear weapon.
Is that true? Because I thought that a lot of that happened during the Donald Trump, not the Donald Trump. I thought a lot of that happened during the Obama administration, in which Joe Biden was the vice president. I don't think he publicly was like, "Oh, we shouldn't be going to the Middle East like that."
Don't make the same mistake. Focus on, and we'll help you focus on getting the bad guys. And we got to think through what is happening after Gaza, after this is over. Who's going to occupy Gaza? I've been working with the Arab states. I won't mention them because I don't want to get them in trouble. But 5 leaders in the Arab community who are prepared to help rebuild Gaza, prepared to help transition to a two-state solution.
To govern it?
Well, to maintain the security and peace while they're working out a Palestinian authority that's real and not corrupt.
Right, well, Mr. President, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
So obviously here in Wisconsin, it was a crucial state for you, one of the ones that put you over the top. It was the same for Trump when he won in 2016, and he was actually here last week on his day off from the Stormy Daniels trial. He told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Mr. President, quote, "If everything's honest, I'd gladly accept the results of the election." And then he continued, though, with this: "If it's not, you have to fight for the right of the country." How seriously do you take that threat?
Seriously, just like I did January 6th.
But I mean, it's legitimate though. Like, if the election is stolen, there should be some recourse for that. Of course, the problem is you also have to prove that, which can be tough and difficult. So that itself is another problem. But the idea that in order to be democratic, you cannot question the results of election is absurd to the point of hilarity. It's absurd to the point of hilarity. It'd be like, oh, don't you support democracy? Then why don't you just accept whatever the state says is the result of the election? Like, that's ridiculous.
The guy is not a Democrat with a small d. I mean, he is the idea. Look, you can't only love your country when you win. Number one, how many court cases do they have? Supreme Court cases. They all said this is totally legitimate election. This is
I don't know if that's what they said with all those cases. I think some of them they said that with the cases, but a lot of them it was like on standing, basically like you need more evidence or you guys are lying, something like that. So it didn't necessarily have that conclusion.
No, I mean it's saying whether he may not accept the outcome of the election. I promise you, he won't.
Promise that he won't.
He won't.
So,
and which is dangerous. Look, I travel around.
I mean, dangerous to his political position, sure, yeah. I mean, maybe don't cheat in the election then. Maybe don't do that.
The world with other world leaders, you know what they all say? Not a joke. 80% of them after you have a major meeting, they go, "Got to win. My democracy to stay." Their democracy.
What did he say?
Major meeting with other world leaders, you know what they all say? Not a joke. 80% of them after you have a major meeting, they go, "Got to win. My democracy to stay." Their democracy to stay. Because when you think of the things he's saying, if I'm reelected, if he's reelected the president, he's going to make sure his attorney general prosecutes those he tells them to prosecute. And if he doesn't, he's going to fire him on the first. Not just the first, no, he said this about prosecution across the board. He's going to be, I am your retribution.
I don't remember this, but I didn't really follow Trump super closely anymore.
What president's ever said anything like this stuff? But he means it. Going to wipe out the changes we made in Medicare, change we made in terms of drug prices, change we made.
The change in terms of drug prices is the change that he made, and then he rolled back on day one. Like, look up the stuff that he did with insulin. It's hilarious how he rolled back there was a price ceiling that Donald Trump had put in place for insulin that made it extremely more affordable. I had tons of friends in college who were diabetic, and they were jumping for joy because because they knew that insulin was going to be a lot more affordable for them. But then Joe Biden rolled back that change. Then he's sitting pretty over here at the State of the Union address, over here acting like this is some idea that he came up with himself. Like, man, you just stole this idea from Trump, got rid of his policy for it, and then brought it back 2 years later as if this was your own. You can't pretend like you've been some great warrior for people with diabetes when you rolled back a change that would have greatly reduced the cost of insulin for many people.
Wipe it all out. And then he's going to put in a 10% tax, which is going to increase everybody's cost. The average American costs $1,500 a year. I mean, listen to what he's saying.
So when you look at your campaign, at this moment, it's tight. It's tight. And Barack Obama, your predecessor, of course, he has said that this is an all hands on deck moment. That's how he described it. So he believes your rematch with Trump is going to be incredibly close. It certainly looks like it will be. What's his advice to you when you talk to him?
Keep doing what I'm doing, and to make sure that what his advice.
What? What happened to the rest of that video? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Why did it cut out? I don't understand what happened to the rest of that video. But anyways, the New York Post put out a video, put out an article saying Biden tells a lineman during CNN interview, and they kind of went through everything that he said. So let's do a rundown of all these lies. So the first one says, I've created over 15 million jobs since I've been president. So it says here, Biden's favorite falsehood told over and over and over again, no matter how many fact checks call him out. He took office at the tail end of a pandemic that blew a hole in the economy when lockdown policies wholeheartedly endorsed by Democrats took people out of the office and onto COVID stimulus checks. He created nothing. After the introduction of the vaccine, people returned to the workforce. If anything, Biden's policies slowed the recovery. It took until July 2022 for the U.S. economy to regain all jobs lost due to the pandemic. Well, people are still getting jobs after July 2022, to be fair to Joe Biden. Line number two. Other than Herbert Hoover, Donald Trump is the only president who lost more jobs than he created. This is the Coralie lie. I don't know what that means. Trump didn't lose jobs. He was president during a global pandemic. That's true. And liberals were thrilled to put people on government checks and shut down the world during COVID. I don't like how this is written. And whoever wrote this didn't even want his name to be on this thing. I don't like how this is written. This seems like very like opinionated. Like this almost feels like it was written by like an editor for like I don't know, Outkick the Coverage or something. Line number 3. Look at what he's going to do if he gets elected. Says he's going to do away with what I've done on Medicare, reducing the price of Medicare. There's no basis for this, as Trump has said he, quote, will never do anything that will hurt or jeopardize Social Security or Medicare. Further, Trump pursued the exact same executive orders to lower prescription drug prices. Biden, yes. He stole that policy from Donald Trump and pretended that it was his own. Line number 4. We have 1,000 billionaires in America. Know what their average federal tax is? 8.3%. Factcheck.org notes the top 0.1% of earners with more than $4.4 million in expanded cash income pay an average rate of 25.1% in federal income and payroll taxes. Yes. 1,000 billionaires. Is that the same? Hold on, let me see here. Average federal tax on billionaires. Because one thing that's tricky here, and I think that they're being a little squirrely with their words in this article, is the top 0.1% of earners is not the same as all billionaires. Let's see here. Let me go through these. This is from Oxfam America. Okay, let's see. It says here. According to a 2021 White House study, the wealthiest 400 billionaire families in the U.S. paid an average individual tax rate of just 8.2%. So that seems to be where he got that from. 8.3%. That's 400 billionaire families. That's not all billionaires in America, though. Let's see here. It says the 400 wealthiest American taxpayers pay an average federal income tax rate of around 23%. So these are probably the same 400. This is like the same population too, interestingly enough. 400 wealthiest American taxpayers, 400 wealthiest 400 billion. I think that's the same number. Is that the same number? It's hard to tell. I'm confused though as to why there's no number for all billionaires. He made the claim for all billionaires. There are no numbers about that from what I can tell. Okay, lie number 5. We've already turned it around on the economy. Let's see here. Biden quoted some tough figures in the economy, noting that the cost of buying a home had doubled. Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Biden spots that in denial. True. Lie number 6. The polling has been wrong all along. Mid. Polling can be right and wrong sometimes. It's not going to be perfect, but you got to give like out of 5% wiggle room either way. It says here, Trump leads Biden in all 7 swing states, according to an Emerson poll released Tuesday. Yeah, I guess that's true. But to be fair, like the polls could easily swing. I'm expecting about a 10% swing in Joe Biden's poll numbers from now until the election, just because I think they're like people who are mad at Joe Biden about stuff like Israel and Palestine, for example, who eventually are going to come around and be like, you know what, there's nobody better for me to vote for. I'll vote for Joe Biden. So we're gonna see it like a 10 or so % swing in Joe Biden's direction, in my opinion, unless the polls are wrong with how Americans are going to view Donald Trump being put in prison. And once he's put in prison, which I think is relatively likely, at that point, then people start viewing Trump positively. And that would be the death knell of Joe Biden's campaign, in my opinion, because the race is already pretty tight. He can't afford to have a jailed Trump, sinking his favorability. Okay, it says here, line number 7, there's corporate greed going out there, and it's got to be dealt with. Labor costs increased 4.2% between 2023 and 2024. They increased 5.1% from 2021 to 2022. The cost of everything from supplies to shipping, rent, and taxes have gone up. Why? Because the huge amount of government money injected into the system, minimum wage increases by California and other states, and pent-up demand by consumers. And how is Biden going to deal with it? Tell companies they can't raise prices to avoid losing money? I don't know if I completely understand everything that's being said there. Because no one is denying that companies are making more money than they have been previously. This is in spite of all of this stuff. So you can let's say have a labor increase of like 4.2%. If you decide to raise your cost of everything by 6.3%, then that's a little bit different than just trying to avoid costs, right? If you were trying to avoid costs, you would just increase everything by the same rate as your labor costs. But that's not what companies are doing. And that's why a lot of people who don't really understand economics are saying there's just corporate greed. Because they understand why a company might need a surplus of money in like long term in the future, or why a company might suddenly want to hold on to extra cash when previously that was not their strategy historically. Lie number 8. Inflation was 9% when I came into office. This is a lie of the night. Biden continues to pretend that the U.S. is in terrible shape when he took office, when it was already on the rebound thanks to Trump's Warp Speed project that vaccinated people quickly against COVID. Inflation was a measly 1.4% in January 2021. Then Biden went on a first-year Jenkins Taylor spending spree. Man, whoever wrote this needs to be put on a timeout. You know what? I bet this is the number I looked at in my State of the Union video, actually. Like most like indicators of the economy, like those numbers have doubled negatively. And since Trump took office and since Biden took office, they have been like going down a little bit as the economy slowly improves. The economy is better like today than it was like maybe like a year and a half ago, but still not better than it was when Joe Biden took office. And let's see, line number 9, they have the money to spend. It angers them and it angers me that they have to spend more. They have the money to spend. According to Bankrate, 76% of adults making less than $50,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. an increase from 71% the year before that. Yep, and people cutting back on gas, groceries. Yep, that's all stuff that I noted when I reacted to that. Line number 10. Civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of these bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. So it's technically true. Yes, it's liable to suggest that Israel's deliberately targeting population centers. No, they're not. They're just targeting where Hamas is. That's an easy one. Line number 11. We're not taking away from Israel's security. We're taking away from Israel's ability to wage war in those areas. Well, kind of weasel words. I mean, I think that this assumes that Israel could just take as many, should be able to just like, should be able to be willing to, no, sorry. This assumes that Israel should be willing to just like take terrorist attack after terrorist attack without responding. And so they should just sit there secure, and should only be doing things in the defensive measure, not a preemptive, like, let's go get the terrorists who are saying they want to kill all the Jews type of campaign. So if Hamas grows, again, that is detrimental to Israel's security. So taking away from Israel's ability to wage war does negatively impact Israel's security. Line number 12, it made no sense, in my view, to engage in thinking in Iraq they have a nuclear weapon. Biden brought this up saying he warned President Benjamin Netanyahu to not make the mistakes we made in Afghanistan and Iraq, except Biden voted in favor of invading Iraq. So Biden may regret that decision today, but it made sense to him back then. Line number 13. You can't only love your country when you win. Someone better tell all the celebrities in the Democratic Party. Oh yeah, all that stuff. This is not to say that you're not sure, like if you believe the results of the election, is not to say that you hate your country, by the way. So that's a one thing to take into account. Line number 14. I travel around the world and other world leaders know what they say. 80% of them, you gotta win, my democracy is at stake. Maybe we can't say this is absolutely live, but it sounds like one of those statements for which the press loves to go after Trump. Are other world leaders really pulling Biden aside after his nap and saying democracy is at stake if he loses? Yeah, that is a little bit incredulous. Line 15. Then Trump is going to put in a 10% tax that's going to increase average Americans' cost $1,500 a year. Trump has proposed no such tax. Perhaps Biden means Trump's plan for a 10% tariff on imported goods, which may or may not cost Americans more money. You know who else is considering imposing tariffs? Biden. Yeah, I did hear about this. That was crazy. Because I remember when Trump was doing the whole like trade war with China or whatever, and I was kind of thinking at the time, I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea or not. Because in my head, I was like considerably younger, but I was like, imagine like kids on a playground being like doing like trying to do tit for tat stuff. It's like, oh, if you want to trade with me, then you have to pay a 5% tax, not a 4% tax. In China, it's like, oh, really? Well, if you want to trade with me, then you have to pay a 6% tax, not a 5% tax. And America's like, oh, really? Well, if you want to trade with me, then you need to do a 6% tax, not a 5% tax. Like this policy of like fair trade, not free trade, is something that Trump got seriously dinged about during the presidential debates, if I remember correctly. It was a bad policy for Trump to do it, and I think it's a bad policy for Joe Biden to do it too. I don't know why Joe Biden is deciding to do this type of policy now. It's kind of a strange time to do it, because especially since it would negatively affect the economy. So. But this is relatively a good article. I just wish it was written with less snark. So, I mean, it is what it is. You know, if you guys want to vote for this doddering your old fool, like, you know, that's up to you, I guess. Not sure how you're doing that, but okay. No, I understand the logic, even if I disagree. I'm just looking forward to the debates between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, because those, if they end up happening, which I'm not sure if they will, should be very interesting.